ICE raids in Los Angeles have sparked protests and unrest from coast to coast, prompting a swift federal response. So, could the nationwide backlash reshape how America handles immigration enforcement? I'm Veronica Dudo. Let's find out.
This is In America Today from the Ticker News Studios in New York City.
Tensions are erupting nationwide following a wave of ICE operations in Los Angeles that led to the arrest of several convicted criminals living in the United States illegally. The Department of Homeland Security confirmed the targeted arrests, which sparked protests and violent riots across Los Angeles, prompting President Trump to deploy the National Guard. Now demonstrations have spread to cities like New York, Dallas, and Seattle, where anti-ICE protesters have clashed with police. The unrest marks a dramatic escalation in the ongoing national debate over immigration enforcement and public safety. President Trump was asked about the situation during his visit to the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. last night.
If we weren't there, if we didn't bring in the National Guard and the Marines, you would probably have a city that was burning to the ground, just like it was a number of months ago with the housing. You would have had a big problem there. We weren't. In fact, the police chief said so much. If you look at what his statements were, he said, we're very lucky to have had that. If we weren't there, that city would have been burning to the ground, would be burning right now.
For more, I'm joined by Joseph Tully, a criminal defense attorney. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So first, there's a lot going on with the ICE raids, of course, the protests, the riots, and then the federal government has stepped in. Could you just explain exactly what all started in Los Angeles?
Certainly. So ICE was conducting raids under the current administration, and where they were sort of targeting, so to speak, were more working class people. So outside Home Depot, within a manufacturing district in Los Angeles. And their presence was more pronounced than normal, and that attracted groups of protesters. And the protests grew. Some of them were, became violent, and there were, cars on fire. President Trump then invoked something called Title 10. So we're hearing that he called out the National Guard, which normally a governor does, but here President Trump did that. And the law that gives him that ability to do that is Title 10. And not to get too complicated, but there's two different ways that he could have invoked Title 10. One is a harsh way, and one is a more reserved way. And President Trump chose to do the reserved way. So yes, he did jump in. He didn't get the governor's approval first, or work with the Governor Newsom of California, to call the National Guard. But when he did so, he nationalized the Guard, and he has them in a capacity where they're there to assist ICE and to protect federal buildings. They cannot make arrests. They can't be too active. They're there merely as watchdogs to make sure that federal employees are safe and federal buildings are safe. Then you have Governor Newsom filing a lawsuit against President Trump, saying, listen, the federal government overstepped their bounds here. There's laws, they can come in and do this, but that's only when there's acts of invasion, insurrection, or where we can't keep the peace. And as we just saw with that clip with President Trump, he's saying if we weren't there, the city would be burning down. But that kind of almost admits that it was a bit premature. They're supposed to come in when the state can't keep control, not prematurely. So we will see this play out in federal court. Governor Newsom, as I said, filed a lawsuit, and then he filed an injunction. An injunction is a way to ask a judge to stop somebody from doing something. So here, the lawsuit is for a judge to declare what the federal government did and is doing is unconstitutional. But the injunction is to have a judge order the federal government to stop. And the emergency injunction to stop. That was struck down by a judge, but that is playing out in federal courts as we speak.
So, of course, there's a lot of clips that we are watching, and as you mentioned, it will be playing out in federal court. Do you think this is something where potentially more Democratic-leaning judges could, make their decisions one way, and then this ultimately is appealed and then given to the Supreme Court? Because, as you mentioned, with the National Guard being deployed and the Marines talking about keeping those federal buildings safe and those officials, there were Molotov cocktails being thrown. There, of course, were so many things being burned. Do you think this is going to be fixed anytime soon, or that this will be dragging out for a while through the courts?
So I think it will not settle. I don't see either President Trump backing down from his position, and I don't see Governor Newsom backing down from his position. They have a very contentious relationship. Again, normally speaking, before a president federalizes the National Guard, they work with the governor. And that's one thing that the governor is complaining about here, is saying, look, the federal government did not work with us before invoking Title 10 here. But I don't see either side backing down. So it will work its way up to the Supreme Court. That is my prediction. I don't see it dragging out. Because there, as you're saying, there is violence going on. There's Molotov cocktails. There is active force. The Los Angeles Police Department is making arrests. There are reporters reportedly getting hit by non-lethal weapons. So I think that this is on an emergency level, and because of that, it will play out very quickly in the court, because both sides will appeal to an emergency no matter who wins.
Has the Trump administration offered any legal justification or potentially new policy guidance for how ICE is operating?
So yes, I mean their justification is that look, we need to follow the law here. We have undocumented migrants coming in, and we can't have open borders. If you have open borders, you don't have a country. We have a legal process for entry into the country. People are not following that. And we've had situations in the last few years where we've seen on TV where there was migrant caravans coming through over the last, 4+ years. And they're saying, we are going to enforce the immigration laws. And that's what they're doing. And, of course, everything is very complicated. And in looking at the lawsuit, in looking at what President Trump has done, both sides have arguments. So it's not as though one side could say, I'm 100% right, it's untouchable. There are arguments on both sides. So the ICE is really seeking to enforce the law. I think the protests are coming because of a lot of reasons, but people are pro-maybe heavy-handed use of ICE, and some people just don't like the fact that ICE is doing their job and cracking down on undocumented immigrants.
Now, of course, we've been unpacking the legal role in all of this, but just curious, what do you think about the role social media is playing in potentially fueling or organizing some of these riots?
So I think there's a lot of polarity going on, and President Trump seems to be a polarizing figure. So social media is basically can create an echo chamber. So the left sees things that kind of stoke their fires, and the right sees things that are stoking their fires. I think there's also a concern that misinformation can spread on both sides of the equation, on both sides of the political aisle, to where if misinformation is out there, it can take a situation that's already, basically a powder keg ready to blow and sort of force the issue here. So I think creating the echo chamber, on one hand, it could get information out. On the other hand, it can just, stoke the, throw fuel on the fire, so to speak.
Now, of course, we are in June, so the Supreme Court waiting to have some of those big decisions handed down. How quickly do you think this could be considered an emergency that we might potentially, hear anything from them?
Well, it would in the district court, and then, like I said before, no matter who wins and who loses, the other side will appeal. So it will go from a district court to an appellate court. Here it be from the district court to the Ninth Circuit, then to the Supreme Court. So right now we're at the first layer of the federal court system. There's a middle layer circuit, and then there's the Supreme Court, and that is the final word on the law. So I think this will be days and weeks. I mean, maybe at the Supreme Court level, it might be a month, month and a half, 2 months. I don't see it dragging out for a long time. This is, and I see it playing out rather. So I'd say days and weeks, not months and months.
Joseph Tully, thank you so much for sharing your insight on this topic.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is Ticker. We'll be right back.